So I don't have any slides, but I have the distinct pleasure of being the very last speaker of the day. And so on behalf of Lieutenant General Ed Cardone, who is the Commanding General of U.S. Army Cyber Command and Second Army, thank you all for attending this special Atlanta edition of the Cyber Talks. I want to thank General Fogarty for not only opening the discussion this morning, but also for suggesting that we hold a round of the Cyber Talks right here in Atlanta so that we could tap into the tremendous intellectual capital of Georgia Tech and some of our other great Southern colleges and universities. And so a special thanks to the Georgia Tech Research Institute for their conference center and for the use of this wonderful venue. Many thanks to all the very speakers who spoke on a variety of topics today, gave us a lot to think about, and hopefully inspired some new collaborative efforts. And last but not least, I think we owe a big thanks to the team from the Army Cyber Institute who did all the hard work that it takes to put on an event like this. So let's give them a round of applause. So this afternoon, I want to speak on General Cardone's behalf about how Army Cyber Command is using innovation and partnerships, particularly with industry and academia, to get at some of our biggest challenges. And I think if we have any students who are here, I would hope that this would also potentially spark an interest in pursuing some work opportunities as an Army civilian or as a soldier with one of our many cyber organizations. I think the imperative for partnership in the cyber domain is even greater than the need for partnership in the other operating domains. And so, to give some sense of how critically important it is in cyber, I'd like to start with a historical context, kind of on some of the evolution of technologies that we've been using, a little bit on the evolution of the Army Cyber Command, and then put the threat in context to explain why partnership is even more important in this domain. And so I'll begin by contrasting the Army that I joined in 1987 with the Army of 2016. And there may be a few of you who experienced similar ancient Army traditions like I did. There might be others, you've seen it, if you're very young, you've seen it on television, Life Before Computers, or maybe heard about it from your grandparents. But when I joined the Army as a second lieutenant, and I was a platoon leader in a light infantry division in Alaska, and I was entrusted with the latest technology, cutting-edge equipment. I was responsible for one of 2 typewriters in the company. And not only did I have a typewriter, but mine was electric. You could plug it into the wall, and if you hit the backspace key, it would type over on a white ribbon that would essentially delete the characters that you had just typed. And aside from the supply sergeant, that was the only one in the company. So if the GSR, the Ground Surveillance Radar Platoon, needed to type up anything, they had to come to my platoon to use that. I remember using rotary dial phones, having to crank through all those, putting a pencil in the holes when your fingers started getting tired. I remember walking across the street to division headquarters to use the fax machine on the installation if you wanted to send a document to another division. And as in my first job doing signals intelligence, we would keep our SIGINT order of battle on 3x5 cards in a shoebox. And if someone left the tent flap open too long, they would all blow out of order and you had to resort them. So a few of the ancient warrants are nodding their heads, but the rest of you have no idea what I'm talking about. We grew more advanced. I remember as a young captain talking to one of my warrant officers, we were starting to have computers, and I asked him, what's a LAN? And he said, a LAN is a local area network. It's when computers are connected so that they can talk to each other. And I asked, about what? Because I could not imagine the world that we are in today. And so clearly, you fast forward to the 21st century, to 2016, we are the beneficiaries of what to me still seem to be marvelous advances in technology that make possible tremendous capabilities and undreamed of military advantage. And the importance of cyberspace in today's operating environment absolutely cannot be overstated. Our forces absolutely depend on the functioning of military networks and combat systems to be effective, not only in cyberspace, but in all of the other operating domains as well. And although people remain our most critical element, we maintain our military superiority as a nation, in part because of the technological advantages that are afforded by cyberspace operations. But at the same time that those cyberspace capabilities make us unbelievably strong, our reliance on cyberspace has also made the nation and our Army and other military services extremely vulnerable to a broad new array of threats. So over the last 30 years, as the military has become more reliant on information technology, cyber threats to DoD networks have evolved from nuisance hackers to nation-state actors, and I know that most of you are well aware of these, and others who probe our defenses constantly and pose a persistent threat to our national security. Like many businesses and organizations, we just talked about Target and Walmart, DoD experienced its own first cybersecurity wake-up call in 2008 when a flash drive was used to infect networks at U.S. Central Command with malicious malware. And that malware was designed to steal sensitive information that was destined for a foreign intelligence agency in another country. Once discovered, DoD launched a concerted effort to clean up its networks and systematically changed its approach to cybersecurity. And part of that, in 2009, was when the Department of Defense established the U.S. Cyber Command and directed the services to organize, man, train, and equip forces to take advantages of the opportunities in cyberspace and to prepare to defend the nation in this new domain. So today, U.S. Cyber Command, and I know we have a number of Cyber Command folks who are here today or from its subordinate entities. First, their mission is to defend DoD networks. Second, to defend the nation against cyber attacks of significant consequence. That may be against, include loss of life, severe economic impact to the U.S., or serious adverse actions with foreign policy consequences. And then the third mission of Cybercom is to provide cyber support to military operations and plans. As part of a whole of government approach, Cybercom also works with the Department of Homeland Security and with the Department of Justice to defend the nation against cyber attacks. You probably are aware that the Department of Homeland Security is the lead agency for protecting, mitigating, and recovering from domestic cyber incidents. And Department of Justice and the FBI investigate, attribute, disrupt, and prosecute cyber crimes and provide domestic response to national security incidents. For example, the FBI led the investigation into the Sony network attacks by North Korea. So each of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, have a component Cyber Command, I'm from Army Cyber Command, that support Cybercom's joint mission. Each service also has the mission to defend their own networks. We heard earlier today about some of the things the Navy's doing to protect their own networks and to organize, train, and equip cyberspace forces. Army Cyber, again, is that Army service component under Cybercom. The Army activated Army Cyber Command in October of 2010 under its first commander, Lieutenant General, now retired Hernandez, with a mission to direct and conduct integrated electronic warfare, information, and cyberspace operations as authorized or directed to ensure freedom of action in and through cyberspace and in the information environment, and to deny those same advantages to our adversaries. So over the last 5 years, Army Cyber has made incredible progress in manning, training, and equipping the 41 different teams that make up the Army's share of the cyber mission force. Back in September of 2013, we only had 2 teams that were at IOC, or Initial Operating Capability. Today, we have 36 teams at IOC or better, and should have all 41 at IOC by the end of this FY 2016. So as you, I think, have discussed earlier today, those come in 3 flavors, and I think we have representatives from all of them here. Army cyber protection teams, or defense teams, that are deployed across the globe defending our networks. We have combat mission forces, represented by folks like Major Jim Twist, that conduct cyber operations in support of combatant commands. Cyber national mission forces, I know I saw Liz Popiak out here, that work with other intergovernmental partners defending our nation's critical infrastructure. And this has taken an incredible effort. We have an incredible team and we have incredible partnerships. And even as our cyber forces continue to mature, the Army has identified some cyber capability gaps through capability-based assessments and analysis, and with 2 of the top ones being situational awareness and network defense. So one of our top priorities is to make our networks more defensible through hardening, standardization, and modernization, while also improving our situational awareness, our ability to see our own network activity more clearly and to detect others who may be operating in our networks. The Army's network modernization efforts are collapsing networks. They are reducing the network's attack surface area, improving bandwidth and reliability, and upgrading our defensive capabilities. Currently, however, the Army lacks a unified means of visualizing and understanding complex network data and for sharing that across all the many organizations that play a role in defending the networks. So to improve our situational awareness, we're pursuing advanced analytics to rapidly aggregate that data in order to see and identify anomalies that would indicate threats. We're also developing network mapping capabilities that will help us provide a better picture of our own networks and help us find and deal with cyber threats, both in terms of external threats as well as potentially insider threats. The Army's network improvements closely align with DoD efforts towards building an enterprise network architecture known as the Joint Information Environment, or JIE. Many of you are already familiar with that. The JIE will increase our capacity for situational awareness and our ability to share and relate this information to operations. Finally, Army Cyber is an active partner with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, on their Plan X cyber warfare program to develop foundational programs for planning and executing cyberspace operations. So there's nothing new about collaboration between industry, science, academia, and defense. The Manhattan Project is perhaps, one of the premier examples of a partnership like that in the interests of national defense. The Wright brothers are another example of very important now military and commercial capabilities that were developed outside the Department of Defense. In the same way that I compared the communication and technology that was available to us when I joined the Army in 1987, I want to take a minute to compare the threats that we faced back then, which I think will reinforce why that kind of industry and academia partnership is so much more critical in the cyber domain. First, 1987, I was stationed in Alaska. One of the things we worried about was, believe it or not, Soviet paratroopers that were going to come jump into Alaska and attack the pipeline coming from somewhere in the Kamchatka Peninsula. We also worried, if you were in DoD back then, about hordes of tanks from Warsaw Pact nations crossing the plains of Europe. We worried about nuclear weapons that might be delivered by ICBMs, by submarines, by Soviet Bear bombers. And I'm going to highlight 4 ways that today's cyber threats differ so dramatically from those threats that we worried about in the 20th century. First, back then, our adversaries, and these are really obvious, but it bears stopping to think about it sometimes. Those adversaries were separated by many hours of flight time at a minimum, even for a ballistic missile, by thousands of miles of ocean, or by a lack of means to even get to the US in the first place. And now our adversaries have direct access to us in ways that were entirely unthinkable back then. It entirely changes the dynamic of territorial safety that was previously afforded to us by the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Second, unlike nuclear weapons, Bear bombers, ICBMs, cyber weapons are far less expensive, as we've just talked about, and frankly, a lot easier to procure. The digital tools that are available in cyberspace give any adversary a cheap and easy means of doing something that was previously limited only to very wealthy nation states, and that is the ability to reach out and touch America directly. Malware and other cyber tools, as we know, are very cheap and easy to acquire. Bad actors face little to no risk for trying to attack us and failing, which gives them a huge disproportionate advantage. For a small amount of money, an adversary can inflict considerable damage, as we saw some of the figures in the Navy brief today, considerable damage to our networks and systems, or at least cause us to spend a lot of time and effort in responding to their threat and intrusion. And another way that this threat differs so significantly is that it's real, it's now, and it's constant. Back in 1987, we trained to prepare for a potential attack by our adversaries. And, thank God, we never actually had to counter that. But in today's cyber domain, we're already engaged with the enemy in virtual contact every single day. And so if you know folks that work at the National Security Agency, they'll inform you that our potential adversaries are probing DoD networks millions of times a day. And these groups and individuals, as we've discussed, target not only military and government networks, but also those of businesses and the data and personal information of individuals. They turn their resources against private business, against research labs, academic institutions, and our citizens to steal the fruits of our creativity, to potentially negate decades of research and development, to steal or delete corporate data, or to compromise PII, personally identifiable information. And it could be relatively easy because those who seek to harm us can use the very same internet, the same mobile communication devices, the same social media platforms that are used not only across DoD, but that my kids use, that your mother uses, and that are used by business and the financial industries. So this interconnectedness makes it a lot easier for potential adversaries to find vulnerabilities that they can use to attack us. It's as though everybody now has, instead of back in the day when nobody else could afford an ICBM or a jet or a submarine, as though, you know, my mother has her own submarine every day and she uses it all the time. The pervasiveness and ubiquity of this technology is what makes partnering with industry and academia so especially crucial in the cyber domain. So partnerships with academic institutions like the Army Cyber Institute are invaluable to increasing our understanding of cyberspace. Partnerships with universities, colleges, and laboratories, which are a source of new knowledge and ideas, are also a resource for developing the human capital that our nation needs to improve its cybersecurity. Partnerships are also critically important because collectively we face common threats and challenges that no one entity is equipped to counter. And it's important to remember that the private sector owns and operates over 90% of the critical infrastructure in the United States, not the Department of Defense. Cyberspace is far too vast for any one sector to secure. Different sectors will see different threats at different times. One company may detect a threat, and if that information is shared, as we've talked about, it might become an entire sector's defense or cross-sector defense, although I have to be honest, I am rethinking some of my thoughts about sharing threat data now, following the previous presentation. So the Army needs the innovative power of the American industry to maintain its competitive advantage on land and in cyberspace. And realizing that our outdated 20th century acquisition models are too slow for the pace of change in cyberspace, the Army is working to speed up acquisition processes from research and development through testing and evaluation. And I'm going to talk about 4 smaller programs, but I think they're all important, that Army Cyber is pursuing with academia and industry. First, under the umbrella of DoD's, it's called the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, or DIUX, set up in the heart of Silicon Valley. And the Army is working to create a cyberspace operations consortium among industry, academia, and government agencies that would help eliminate barriers and address our most crucial cyberspace operational challenges. Using a special prototype authority, the Army has launched several cyber innovation challenges to mature cyberspace requirements and support the testing and evaluation of pilot capabilities. The first innovation challenge was issued last year, and it delivered a prototype of deployable kits for our cyber protection teams. The first challenge resulted in our purchase of 4 cutting-edge transportable high-performance microcloud computing solutions that interface with the Army's network, allowing our teams to conduct countermeasures in real time and enabling commanders to take immediate action to defend their network. I can tell you, if we had followed standard Army acquisition processes for that, we might look at acquiring something several years from now. But we were able to do that in a year through last year's Army Cyber Innovation Challenge. This year, we are building on that challenge to launch next challenge in just a few days on March 31st. And in this challenge this year, we are looking for advanced software-based solutions to manage our cloud environment and cloud virtualization technologies supporting high-performance cybersecurity platforms and applications. Another cyber innovation challenge that's currently underway is focused on cyber situational awareness technology and solutions that will help tactical commanders visualize their cyber terrain and understand the threats and risks to their mission. And so if you're interested in participating in any of these, you can search Army Innovation Challenge, and that should take you to the webpage that discusses these various programs. The third one I want to mention, Army Cyber Command is also leading another initiative where we're partnering with industry to combat a growing threat from terrorists who use social media. Very apt given this afternoon's discussion. Terrorists who use social media, like ISIS, to recruit members and spread their messages of violence and terror and their reliance on social media for propaganda. So Army Cyber's Silicon Valley Innovation Pilot is teaming 10 our cyber experts with 10 industry counterparts to find ways that we could potentially counter the use of social media by those terror actors. Army Cyber Command is also participating in DoD's Hacking for Defense program at Stanford University in California. Hacking for Defense is a new course at Stanford's engineering school that's designed to help find innovative solutions to some of the nation's biggest national security problems. Under this program, students will be able to choose from 20 challenges that are selected by DoD and by the US Intel community. And those will include Army Cyber's challenge among them to counter the use of social media by malicious actors. These new initiatives are just a few of the ways that the Army has been partnering with industry and the academic community to find innovative solutions to the many challenges that we face in cyberspace that we just probably cannot get to through our traditional institutional means. The Army's also had to find some innovative solutions for recruiting, training, and retaining some of our most important assets, soldiers and civilians who are on the mission every day. We've built a new cyber branch. Colonel Promotable Buckner and her folks at the Cyber Center of Excellence under General Fogarty have done a lot to develop the new doctrine and new organizational constructs for this new branch. They've also been creating new tactics, techniques, procedures, effectively writing the book on cyberspace operations in real time. Moreover, the institutional Army, led by the Center of Excellence and by the Army Cyber Institute, is developing new ways of thinking about cyberspace as a warfighting platform and as a maneuver space, representing a major cultural change in how the future Army will fight and win in the nation's wars. So, I hope that I've shown you that in everything that Army Cyber Command is doing, innovation and partnerships with industry, academia, and other agencies have been a key to our efforts and to our success. Partnerships that draw on the strengths of each, the innovative capacity of the private sector, the intellectual capital of our universities, the resources of the government, and the unmatched power of our military. It's the only way that we can protect and defend the nation against the growing threats from cyberspace. Army Cyber Command is going to be moving to Fort Gordon, Georgia by 2020, and we anticipate that the demand for dedicated people with cyber skills is only going to grow across this region in the Southeast. So for any students in the audience, I sincerely hope that if you are pursuing a career in cybersecurity, you'll consider joining our team on graduation. And again, I'd like to close by saying thanks to Georgia Tech, to all our speakers, to our sponsor, the Army Cyber Institute, and to all of you who participated today. Thanks.